Hello everyone, Mystery here, and today time to talk about the Veteran, and the Veteran is another class in dire need of a rework from Vat Shark, and I'm here to expound on why today. Yesterday we talked about the Zealot, and the reasoning behind the Zealot needing that rework being that this talent tree is completely outdated. It has a ton of filler points, it has a ton of really bad nodes, and a ton of incredibly good nodes, and those are clustered around the tree very close to each other. Some of that stuff we will see again today. Veteran has a few things that ring very true with that. The big difference for Veteran is that a lot of the limitations for this class come down to one or two main core issues. So we're going to be getting into that, but first let me remind you, I'm trying to make that push to 40,000 subscribers, Warhammer 40,000 that is, subscribers before the end of the year, and if you can help me on that journey, I'd greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, let's dive right into Veteran. Just like yesterday, I'm going to first break down what is exactly wrong in my approximation with the Veterans talent tree, with the Veterans structure as a class, and why they need that rework. And today, I actually have something outside of the talent tree. Yesterday, I spent most of my time focusing on the talent tree for the Zealot, because I think that really is the core of his issues. But for the Veteran, there is a bigger issue at hand here, and I'm just going to put it right on the table right away. It's his class identity, right? When you think Veteran, what do you think? Veteran, I think for many of us players, and especially many people who are coming outside to play Darktide, they see him as the guardsman, or they see him as, like, you know, a ranged attacker of some sort, scrappy with the melee, but not melee primarily a ranged weapon user. But the sad truth, the sad reality of the Veteran's existence currently is that their ranged prowess is matched by pretty much every other class. They might have a little bit better ammo capacity, thanks to things like fully loaded down here and Shock Trooper with those recon las guns and those las weapons, but there's not too much they can do with range weapons that really put them head and shoulders above the competition. For comparison, I think that the predominant ranged damage dealer ends up being the Ogryn. With Rumbler builds, he's got the craziest single range damage build. Then you've got, of course, the Psyker with their staves, but that's kind of a different thing. Arbites, I honestly feel like, is a better range damage dealer than the Veteran is, thanks to things like Castigator stance, just generally having some really high impact single target weapons and a ton of buffs that stack that damage way up. And the cool thing for Arbites is that those buffs that buff his ranged attacks, such as the critical chance and the headshot multiplier, those also apply to melee as well, so he's double dipping and being extra good. So that is something we'll have to be looking out for, and I'm going to keep calling back to it as I go through this talent tree and point out where the good and where the bad is. Don't look at this talent tree, this is a fucked one. But the overarching thing is that, yeah, he doesn't have that strong class identity, and that is caused by his lack of focus, his lack of investment in those range playstyles, and he's lacking identity from his abilities and from his keystones, which we'll get down to in a second. So let's go ahead and start breaking down one of the main issues that he has. Just like Zealot yesterday, it is this grouping of good talents and bad talents. We have a lot of very good talents that are all right near each other. Now, the top of this tree isn't so bad, right? We have this right side and this middle that are pretty much neck and neck. These are both extremely viable ways to go. You could go either over here and down or right here and down, but over here is kind of trash because long shot is so trash. Then we come down to here, and this is where the problems really start to begin. Now, I have recently been playing around with smokes, and they aren't terrible, but the problem is that Survivalist as an aura is just so dominant, is such a good aura. It provides so much utility to the team because ammo can be scarce and it makes you self-sufficient. That it's just awesome. And to pair that with Catch a Breath, which is one of the best regeneration perks of any class, just 5% of your toughness per second when you haven't been hit by a melee attack in the last 5 seconds, which means you can just be regenerating in melee, you can be regenerating when you're actively being hit. All that together is crazy, and of course it's topped off by Shredder grenades, which are an awesome multi-use type of grenade. The first really big factor that I think starts to push the Veteran in the direction of what I will call the mono build is the lack of equality in these Blitz options. I think they each have their own use cases, but the Shredder grenade ends up being just a more well-rounded general use because it has 3 charges, and that's a lot for a grenade of this quality. It's on par with the Arbides, 3 charges on his Arbides grenade. The crack grenade has too few charges for what it does, limiting a single target or doing high damage to a single target. That's two charges is too few for this. I think that the reason that this is a low charge count ability or low charge count Blitz is because they were worried about like players who are playing on Malice or whatever, just instantly nuking bosses and stuff like that, because it does really, really chunk bosses on those lower difficulties. But once you've reached a certain threshold of difficulty where there's just so many elites and threats and bosses on the map, 2 crack grenades just doesn't cut it. It doesn't do anything against this huge sea of enemies, so you'd rather have something that can stagger. Smoke grenades has a really, really awkward place in the meta because smoke grenades can at once be useful and useless. Smoke grenades sometimes will be like the thing that can change the whole game and save the day, because they can completely block off a whole wall of gunners. They can stop the ranged twin from firing entirely. If you drop a smoke grenade on him, he'll just like, his AI will break and he'll just stand there and try to walk around and try to get out of it. They can be really useful, but at the same time, it makes enemies act in very unpredictable ways, and enemy AI is a little bit stupid and a little bit smart, and both of those are problems for us, because stupid AI is going to move into unpredictable places you've never seen before and hold up positions that in order to get these really stupid angles on you, and put themselves in corners all over the map because they're now smoked off, instead of just standing there and getting shot. And the smartness of the AI is going to allow them to path around the smoke and perhaps make your holdout position even more compromised. So the smoke grenades, I really wish, and I've talked about this before, but I really wish these had some sort of use case that would provide a buff even if you weren't facing ranged enemies, because this is another thing with the smoke grenades. If you happen to roll a map seed that just doesn't have any ranged enemies in it, and I know we've all seen these before, where we end up going into a map and you're like, what the hell? Like every pack of enemies here is like ragers. It's like all ragers, and there's some crushers and maulers and stuff, but there's no gunners. So your smoke grenades are useless because enemies that are melee path through them the same. So smoke grenades just need something to be done to them to make them more dependable in their use case. And I think that would probably be in the form of like a buff to the team who's standing inside of them. I would love these suppressed fire effects or like, noxious fume effects from either pox bombers or proxy gas on the map. That would be amazing. We then further exacerbate this issue of the mono build, of there being one correct way to build the veteran, by getting down here into these auras. And these auras are some of the least inspired auras in the game. I mean, Fire Team, I've always railed against. 5% damage is such a bland thing. The veteran also, I think, is like, a lot of the talents are very emblematic of an early era of design for Fat Shark and how they design these classes. I mean, not every aura can be an absolute winner, but this is just such a bland thing for the veteran of all people to have when he could be having all sorts of cool stuff. I mean, like, reload speed would have fit better on him, given, that's something that the Arbides has now, but the Arbides has like the additional coherency regeneration from the dog. The Arbides has the enemies that are staggered take more damage. So those are really useful and very powerful things. Fire Team it's damage, but it's so unflashy, it's so unimpactful. I know a lot of times these auras just, it's so hard to calculate what auras you have on the team, so you don't even want to think about it, but this is just so small as to be negligible. And the same thing goes for the 5% movement speed. It's not going to make a whole hell of a lot of difference, because when you want to be fast in this game, you have weapons, you have movement tech on, dueling sword, dagger, a lot of weapons, attack axe. All these weapons have crazy movement speed now that'll boost your movement speed 20-25%, even more, and this 5% is going to get absolutely lost in the wash. So I would love to see these two kind of worked over and bring them onto a power level comparable with Survivalist. I personally, even though Survivalist is a really good aura, I don't have any problems with how strong it is, because it is one reason why you would want to bring a veteran is their aura ability, and survivalist is that aura because it is S tier. It provides a solid amount of ammo, not nearly as much as it used to, but it's a good choice. I would just love there to be something to draw me away from being over here to be over here. And if what Fat Shark ends up doing is just moving the position of this to over here or something, I could see that being a relatively good fix for it as well. It would require you to do some different pathing. But as it stands, this is the best grenade, maybe not by like a huge margin, but it's definitely the best grenade. This is a very, very solid ability. It's certainly better than anything else in this row here, and so you're going to pick that, and then you're going to go Survivalist, which is the best aura, and then right below that we have Kill Zone, which is a crazy damage steroid if you are not using any sort of damage over time effect, but 15% base range damage. That's multiplying all of your damage by 1.15, single 1-point pickup. It makes your range prowess that much stronger. Really good node right underneath Survivalist. And then we get to the meat and potatoes, the biggest issue that Veteran faces currently, which is their ultimate diversity. And I honestly, I would actually kind of like to see what would happen if, instead of like really doing an overhaul of this tree at all, make a couple of like swaps, you know, a positioning of talent, but then the only thing that they would need to do is really overhaul these two abilities here. And, you know, I don't know what they would do with voice of command. I've talked about it before. I've talked about how dominant Shout is in the meta and how it kind of like lets you completely turn your brain off at lower difficulties because that much gold toughness on that shorter cooldown just erases enemy damage nearly entirely. And at high difficulties, it's nearly required of you to play with this. It would be very cool if these two other abilities were brought into competition with that. Now, if you want me to talk about these abilities independently, there's videos in the past where I've talked about, I think, each of them. I've definitely talked about Executioner Stance. I don't know if I've talked specifically about Infiltrate, but Executioner Stance, the issue with Executioner Stance is, yes, you can kill with this ability, but none of these little add-on abilities give you any additional killing abilities, so this is wasted points. Really, it's highlighting additional targets. All that's doing is extending the duration of your Executioner Stance, which already has a really short cooldown. You're going to be fine. This only gives you 25% range damage and 25% weak spot damage. When you're using this ability, it really, like, it generally already synergizes well with the weapons that already have high stats there, and you're not most times like reaching any breakpoints with that. What this ability needs is not extra damage, but what it needs is extra utility. If there was some way that this ability could give like a lock-on ability where you could like paint multiple targets like McCree or whatever that he's called now in Overwatch, and then just high noon all of them at one time. If there was some sort of way that this would regenerate, like you need some sort of regeneration effect or something, because in the current meta of the game, there is no real role. There's no space for the sharpshooter, which is an issue we'll talk about when we get down to the Keystones as well. But there's no real role for the guy who's just shooting and killing things effectively because ammo is so scarce, especially when we're talking about like Havoc. I know we shouldn't balance around Havoc, but like playing only ranged is a difficult playstyle to balance for them, and it also leaves you wide open to taking a billion damage because there's no defensive possibilities with Executioner Stance. It doesn't replenish your toughness when you activate it. It doesn't replenish toughness when you get a kill. It just makes these enemies get highlighted and it makes you deal a little bit extra damage. And that's it. So this just needs some extra effects added to it. I would be careful of making it more complicated or anything because look, we're already reaching like one full page double spaced of description text. I think it could really just simply benefit from some straight up buffs to what stats it gives you, and maybe like even a little bit of a reimagining of how it actually works. On the flip side, Infiltrate, I've always sort of felt that Infiltrate really has no place on the veteran class. It doesn't really fit the, I don't know, it doesn't really fit the fantasy for me. It doesn't fit with a guardsman fantasy. Maybe it fits with like a scrappy, like, you know, like Katachan jungle, like crawling troop who's like hiding behind the leaves or stuff. But I think Infiltrate is just it's just a junky ability that leaves you very, very exposed and fragile when it's not on cooldown, and when it is, you are abandoning a portion of damage that's directed towards you and instead directing at your team. For what benefit, right? The only thing that's beneficial about Infiltrate is you can use it to make plays such as activating the objective or saving an ally that you might not otherwise be able to make. But the problem is it's competing with voice of command, which kind of just allows you to do that stuff de facto by just ulting and then getting your ally up while everything is staggered around you, or ulting and then hacking the objective while everything is staggered around you, right? And this has the additional effect of providing everyone with a ton of gold toughness and regeneration, all that good stuff. Infiltrate is just a very selfish ability, and it's one that, again, just like when I talked about with the Zealot yesterday, it does not play very well with the way the game is designed. The game is not designed to have there just be a get the fuck out of dodge ability where everything stops targeting you and walks away. That breaks immersion, and this ability doesn't give any power at the same time either. So I really wish this ability was something more flavorful in terms of the ability, in terms of the veteran. I think it could still be something stealth related. Perhaps if it was just a like enemies at range won't target you for a certain amount of time, like you have like a camouflage cloak, like enemies in melee might still target you, but ranged enemies won't, so then it would allow you to, like, you know, prioritize something. I don't know, I'll leave that to the designers. But these two abilities right here, being as poor as they are a big issue. And then the other issue that they're kind of rubbing up against is how strong and dominant voice of command is, being one of the best abilities in the whole game. And so there's this huge delta, right? There's this huge delta where, like, you know, you'll be shamed out of a lobby, even as low as like heresy, for not using voice of command. Because, and it's not that people are like dicks about it or anything, but it's just that it's very obvious that this ability is very strong and wins more games. When you use a voice of command and you're using it on cooldown, and you're just, you know, compare using this on cooldown to using this or this on cooldown, you will win games from just shouting constantly. Neither one of these is like gonna change that tide, right? So yeah, this is just a dominant ability. And of course, like I was saying before, we have Demolition Stockpile and Field Improvisation, two amazing S tier abilities for the veteran that are right over the top of it. So we've gone from one or two paths up here that are viable, one path here that's really biasedly good, and then one path here that's absurdly good. So we've already kind of figured out our mono build, right? Your two choices are like here and here so far, and everything else kind of stays the same. Ignore that second build, it's a meme build. Then we have to address the bottom of the tree. The issue with the bottom of the tree, and I'm certain that Fat Shark knows this, is that these keystones are kind of worthless. They don't offer very much in terms of actually defining your build, except for maybe Weapon Specialist. Weapon Specialist is the outlier here. I actually kind of like the way this keystone is designed, because this keystone is like, you know, it allows you to guarantee crits, it allows you to reload weapons. There's a lot of fun things to be experimented with here. The issue is that there is a huge number of points required to be invested to get to these keystones. And this is what leads to the meta of Keystoneless Veteran. There are tons of veteran builds that don't ever go into these points down here, because there are so many quality nodes up here in the tree and in various places that you just have to take. And they are so strong and they are so core to the veteran's power that if you are not taking them, you are missing out and you are setting your build up for failure. Like, if I removed any point in this build, right, all this is single points, I can't remove this because this is giving the gold toughness. This is all important because of the ammo economy with Recon Las Gun. I could remove one of these, but this is giving me a ton of toughness damage reduction, which is S tier. This is giving me like infinite grenades, which is S tier. And then over here, I have like a couple of extra damage options, crit. Like, all this stuff is super essential. None of these things are very essential at all. And focus target is arguably not that essential either. It's only going to give you 20% extra damage on one target every time that you can stack a 5 stack on them, which is every 10 seconds. So it's okay for boss killing, but outside of that, I mean, honestly, like, you could save this point and go somewhere else and probably get similar or better results without as much micromanaging. Same thing applies to Weapon Specialist, where it's like, yeah, you get this cool result, you've got this and always prepared together that are strong and on your toes, which can give you lots of defensive capabilities, but there is so much good stuff in this tree in various places that it's really, really hard to give up on, and I think that is because of these really deep investment paths to get to these keystones. If you look at the way the other classes are designed currently, I'll put one up on the screen here, but look at the length of the path to the keystone. These are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points to get down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points to get down, right? So a ton of investment to get to these keystone points, and that's an issue because, like, I mean, you'll use up all your points taking all the nodes on the way there because they're so good. So what I would really like to see here is really pump these keystones up, right? You need to make these keystones, they should be better than default talents. Focus target is not better than a default talent, or at least any of the choices that you have in the tree. Weapon Specialist might be better, is definitely better than default talent, and Marksman Focus is just a mess. We'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, they really need to pump up the power level of these, and they should probably just make them more accessible in order to get players to them with less invested points. That would be a nice solution there. They could do that by removing these like extra nodes up here and give players like an extra point to spend. That because the veteran's power level is kind of low, so it would be okay if they like kind of trim this. But we'll talk about that when I get to the point where I dissect what exactly I would do to fix this. The last issue we have is that Marksman's Focus is a really weak keystone that no one is choosing because it does not synergize with the weapons that it is clearly designed for, and it doesn't really have a place in Darktide's gameplay loop currently. You simply cannot be standing still and sniping stuff in Darktide 2025 edition. There are very few weapons that benefit well from this range, finesse, strength, and reload speed buff. About the only one that I can think of, the one that has the most desire for these sorts of stats would be like the revolver, because it wants for reload speed and it really likes headshot multiplier, but it already has enough headshot multiplier. And again, there is no sniping in this game. Sniping is not a role that we're really going to have because the maps are not designed to be sniped on. They're not that large, and standing still is a boring and uninteractive way to play. So I think that Marksman Focus should probably be entirely reimagined into something else. It can still be a very much ranged focus playstyle, but what I'd like is if this gave a small differing buff to different types of weapons. And if you did that, what you could do is you could make it so that Marksman's Focus gives you like just a blanket set of buffs, and then each of these little nodes gives you a buff to a different type of weapon. So this would be a great way to indirectly buff your really bad weapon categories, such as vigilant autoguns. What if this is where there's just a node down here that said vigilant autoguns do double damage or whatever, right? Like that would be a great way to make the veteran feel like he is more capable of dealing with ranged, using ranged weapons that other classes have access to but would not use as well, right? So you could buff them for veteran by making this just like the range attackers node. This one can still be the the ID here clearly is like this is the commissar branch, this is like the range attacker branch, this is the commissar branch, and this is like the skirmisher branch who's getting up there and getting in people's faces. But they're not all created equally, right? The commissar branch just ends up being so strong because playing with the team is super strong, and then you just grab nodes from other places. So that is the issues as I envision it with this talent tree. Just to recap, we have clusters of incredibly powerful nodes that have no business being so close to each other. We have some absolute deltas in terms of power between our ultimate abilities generally is the biggest problem, but also the auras and the blitzes. Our keystones might as well not exist, right? You wouldn't miss them in most builds. They're not applicable in most builds. You'll get a little bit out of them, but not as much as a talent, and they're too hard to access. So if a rework came to this class, what would it look like? Well, first and foremost, We need to break up the meta builds. We need to break up the grouping of some of these absolutely like no-brainer combinations. You know, we shouldn't be having close order drill and confirm kill right next to each other up at the top here. They can be, but then you need to also give some equally good stuff elsewhere. This is where the problems really start, is when you have shredders right over top of survivalist. A lot of this would be fixed if you brought the power of these 2 grenades up a good amount. If crack grenades had, let's say, 3 or even 4 charges and had the additional ability to be dropped as landmines that could like clip onto enemies as they walk by. If smoke grenades lasted longer or had a more tangible effect to the team, no matter what enemies you were up against, they would be a adequate, comparable choice versus the shredders. But right now, since the shredders are so good, we're just going this way. So let's make these get a little bit extra power and juice so that there's more temptation to go other routes. Then we have to do the same thing with the auras, because currently survivalist is the only one that you're like, okay, I have a veteran on my team, I need you to bring survivalist aura, right? I would never say that about closing killer fire team. These are like, oh really, did I have 5% extra damage that game? You could have fooled me. So I think these should probably be reimagined to buff something specific that you would want to have a veteran for on the team. Perhaps fire team, I don't know, perhaps fire team allows your team to stack an additional 2 stacks of like damage over time effects or something like that. So this would be like a specific reason to have a veteran on your team. Perhaps close and kill would give all team members a small speed boost, like a 10 or 15% speed boost for like 3 seconds whenever an ultimate ability is used, right? Something really cool like that, where you can feel when you have that aura on your team, you notice the difference. With these two, you really do not ever notice the difference, and they're lacking in power behind survivalists. So again, it leads to this issue where we're going down the same path. So bring these up in power, bring these up in power. I think the intermediate nodes here are probably fine, but then we get down to the really big crux, which is we need a full rework for Executioner Stance and Infiltrate. These need to come up a lot in power, and at the same time, I think that Voice of Command's place in terms of like just might as well have Duty and Honor rolled into it, because this is such a guaranteed no-brainer pick because of how stupid strong it is. Just in the current meta, and it's right over top of these 2 grenade things. So maybe they could take this and shunt it off to one side and then put it over there. I highly doubt that they will be nerfing the ability, but if they could, it would help to balance the disparity in power level between these 3 options and make the other options more enticing. But they would have to give us a lot of juice in these other 2 abilities. I don't want this class to be nerfed overall, and if you hurt the shout ability such that it's still the best ability but it's weaker now, you're hurting the class in a huge way. So I'm really scared about them nerfing it. I don't think that they will, but yeah, if they do nerf it, these other 2 needs to go up, way up in power, as do a bunch of other things. Then when we come down here, we need to shorten the length of the lead up to these keystones, or just make the keystones way more enticing so you are ready and willing to sacrifice the points to go deep and get to them. Currently, the keystones don't really fit with any particular class identity for the veteran. They don't make him any stronger at what he's supposed to be doing of like range shooting, you know, calling the shots as the leader for the team, or skirmishing, switching back and forth between ranged and melee. Arguably, weapon specialist is the only one that can actually kind of fit its role, but I could definitely see that also receiving some quality of life buffs to make it more understandable what's going on there. Perhaps just roll always prepared in with it, so you're not having to spend extra points to get extra effects. At the end of all that, the other thing that really needs to happen for the veteran, as I said before, is we need more buffs somewhere in the tree to the way the veteran handles and uses weapons, right? This guy is a trained killer with ranged weapons. He should be able to do things with guns that no other classes can. He shouldn't just feel like, okay, I'm the guy that has the gun, but he has 25% more ammo, right? He should actually get more use out of picking up ammo versus any other class because he is the trained veteran. He should have suppression immunity, like, you know, he has got suppression immunity here, right? But like, you know, that should be maybe base kit or something like that. Or she is a trained warfighter that has done a lot of shooting in their time, so I would love to see more prowess out of those range weapons, more ability to handle these and use them at close range. If there was some sort of way to perhaps enable veteran to like have attachments, like specifically they can use like laser sight attachments and stuff on all their weapons or whatever, that gives them extra accuracy, just as a baseline buff to their range stuff. I think that would go a long way towards bringing up their power. If that isn't possible, putting it into Marksman's focus when veterans are going investing on being in that range play style. But I think that is a really strong argument that I could make, that we need to give a class identity to this class, because right now it is the shout and ammo bot. That's basically why you bring a veteran. It doesn't really matter. You would just kind of assume they'd have a recon las gun or a plasma gun. I would love to see that new weapon introduced for them at some point, but that's not part and parcel to this video necessarily. But they just need more identity, as far as just not being, oh, I've got a veteran. You don't even have to ask what ultimate ability they're using currently. You're like, okay, they're a shout veteran. They're just a veteran. That's what a veteran means these days. And they're running survivalist because they're shouting, right? The only question might be, what grenade might they have or something. So yeah, that is my takeaways, guys. Let me know down in the comments if you are a veteran stan, if you want them to have the next rework, if there's anything that has been really irking you about this class you think makes it stand out for needing that new rework. And I'll definitely try to reply to as many. And then tomorrow I'll cover Psyker, who in my opinion is probably the least in need of a rework, but could benefit a lot from some small tweaks. So we'll go over that then. But I appreciate you for watching, and see you next time. Mystery out.